Okay, well, thank you. Great to see so many people joined us today. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Pearl. I am VP of Insights for Profitero. And we've just come off the back. I'm sure many of you are recovering from Black Friday and Cyber Week. We are leading into December tomorrow and the very quick movement into Christmas. And obviously, sadly, across Europe, we're also seeing an increase in, I guess, issues with COVID, and particularly in the UK as well. We're seeing greater controls coming in store. So there is no better time really to talk about probably one of the biggest subjects on the moment for how to maintain good availability online. Now, Profitero, we always try and get some of the best industry experts on, and so I am really delighted, and particularly at probably one of the busiest times of the year, very appreciative as well, that we have Francisco Collado from Nestlé Health Science. He's the global e-commerce lead. We also have Douglas Gardner, who is e-commerce and supply chain expert at ViewSonic. And last but certainly not least, we have Alan Wiley, who is the Chief Commercial Officer of Luzern. I'm really delighted to say that Luzern, one of our partners, part of the open ecosystem. And as a managed service provider, Luzern helped many of the leading brands to really grow their e-commerce sales both profitably and sustainably. So Francisco, Alan and Douglas, thank you so much for joining me today. Just a very quick bit of housekeeping. We have the Q&A session, so I'm sure many of you will have questions as we go through. Do please add those questions on to Q&A. We are, as always, we're recording the session, and so therefore the recording will be made available to all of you, and also everyone who registered and wasn't able to join today. They'll be able to listen on catch up and watch the slides as well. But I just wanted to give very briefly, before we move on to the main event, which is talking with our expert panel, is just give some context about the challenges that's going on at the moment. Now, Profitero, we monitor about 500 million products on a daily basis, and we've seen specifically in the UK, so this is UK data, that obviously there are certain categories had huge spikes in availability issues, in out of stock problems, during the first lockdown in sort of March to May of last year. You know, the well-publicized ones out of necessity, things like toilet rolls and beauty, saw huge spikes, which thankfully with the industry generally was able to recover over time. But actually, if you look at data from July to September this year, we're seeing that in many categories, and this is not just grocery, this is non-food as well, and general merchandise, we're actually seeing there's an increase in and continuation of many of these out of stock problems. And I know, you know, I'm sure, unfortunately, many of you are experiencing some of these at the moment. So some of the biggest increases we've seen year on year, perhaps like with nappies, with electronics and clothing, with areas, categories such as shoes, and obviously, particularly worryingly, going into the Christmas period, the toy category as well. Now, one thing I think, despite that, what's still generally quite surprising is that many of brands are really still working out what is the best model for supply chain management, specifically when we're talking about online. Now, we do an annual survey, a benchmarking survey, to really understand with brands across the globe what their capabilities are and how they're gradually growing in terms of their e-commerce capabilities. And I think what was probably still quite surprising is that this year's data, just under half, about 45% of all brands said that their e-commerce supply chain is still very much part of a general fulfillment. In other words, they don't have perhaps specific e-commerce supply chain experts within their organization. And obviously that does differ a little bit by certain categories, but actually generally only around 20% or 1 in 5 of the brands that responded to our survey count themselves really as experts and leaders in the field, so that they can really anticipate and react to these out of stock issues. And actually, and hopefully we'll come on to a little of this today, how to try and anticipate some of these problems. But I guess the challenge with that is that, you know, we all know that the impact online of being out of stock and poor availability can be fairly significant. So you're not just losing losing sales for the period that you're out of stock because of, we talk about the flywheel effect on Amazon, but on generally across the digital shelf, on all retailers and marketplaces, the impacts can last a lot longer. So again, we've done a lot of studies on this. On the left-hand side, you can see here that on Amazon in the UK, if you're out of stock just for one day, it can take up to 3 to 4 days to recover your sales volume, the sales performance. And actually, if that out of stock period extends anything over a week, that the length of recovery doubles, anything up to about 8 days. And when you're trying to think why this might happen, well, again, I mentioned the flywheel effect on Amazon, but it's equivalent on many marketplaces and websites across the globe. Again, we've done similar research, and I think one of the biggest impacts out of stocks can have is on search. So on the right-hand side, you see that on Amazon in the UK, if you're out of stock just for 1 day, again, it can take up to 3 days to recover your search performance. And actually on something, and a retailer such as Tesco, if you're selling through there, it's actually much, much harsher. It can take up to a week. And again, the impacts of being out of stock for 2 or more days can be pretty significant. So again, up to 10 days. So appreciate it's very, 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 very difficult to do. But in reality, if you can react and minimize these effects, because obviously if you imagine 10 days to recover your search placement, that may mean you drop off page 1. Therefore, not only are you losing sales during the period you're out of stock, but also you become largely invisible to many shoppers. Now, we'll talk it through hopefully today some great tricks and some tips of how to do this. But I mean, the good news is that it's not all doom and gloom. There are many, many examples of customers and brands who can react quickly and can actually minimize these effects. This was actually one of our customers in the US, where they ran a promotion on Amazon. Now, the chart you can see here, for those who have access to our Amazon data, you'll know this is part of our tool. It's lovingly called our traffic and conversion bubble chart. So it mixes Amazon glance view data along with conversion data as well as sales. And we had a customer, as I say, in the US that ran a promotion on Amazon and expected that to sort of drive traffic, but then they were expecting a fairly sort of significant slump after the promotion. So they reduced their sales forecast. Actually, when they saw the data coming through with glance views levels maintaining at the sort of pre-promotion levels, they reacted very quickly. They were one of these experts, so they did have a good link to their supply chain. And for this one product, they were actually able to increase, work with supply chain, work with manufacturing, and actually increase deliveries on a fairly quick basis so that they were avoided being out of stock on Amazon. So using data to really react very quickly, and annualized over a period of a year, just for this one product, they estimate that they've saved about $500,000. So again, appreciate that's one example, but hopefully we'll talk through today in more detail about how we can sort of learn from that and use and react to it. So go straight on to the panel again. Douglas, Francisco, Alan, thank you so much for joining me today. I think obviously as we just come out of Cyber Week, as I mentioned, it would be wrong not to very, very briefly just have an understanding. Douglas, I know, sorry to pick on you first of all, but I know it's for ViewSonic, obviously a key time, people buying monitors and things like that. Any very sort of early top line views as to sort of how you felt it went and any particular impact availability may have had this year? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, Douglas. Sorry, Douglas. It can't actually. It's lost the sound just for a second. It was working.
Am I?
There we go. There we go. Brilliant.
I'm audible now.
That's all good. We're good.
It helps. Yeah, performance was as expected, as forecast. I was looking at run rates throughout the year, so I knew what our baseline was, and I sort of factored in some increases based on the promotional activity. And some SKUs we overachieved, other SKUs we maybe a little bit under. But as sort of part of my forecasting, I wanted to send in enough stock to cover the Black Friday promotion, and there to be some stock remaining afterwards to use in the sort of last minute deals before Christmas. Because from my experience, Black Friday can get a bit competitive. There's lots of categories, lots of brands. It can be a bit of a challenge to get the space and get the customers' money. Whereas when it sort of gets to sort of December, maybe your ASIN goes on promotion again and you're not competing against as many. So that can be a really good opportunity to sort of drive some sales as well. So for me, it wasn't just about that period around Black Friday. It was what happens afterwards and what can we do to keep momentum going.
Yeah.
So I sort of factored that in. Yeah, planned it really early. Sort of was thinking about it early in the year, even before summer, thinking about, okay, what's availability looking like to the end of the year? What's the timings of when stock's going to be available? When can it land in our European hub from China? Is anyone going to get a canal boat stuck in the Suez Canal again? Is that going to happen? Yeah, just doing it as far in advance as possible to make it that less of a mad rush as the day approaches. And it worked out well. There was only really one ASIN that was a bit of a straggler coming in, only one ASIN we had to sort of chase and push and fight a bit to get through. But yeah, that came in just before the deadline. So yeah, well planned and felt quite well executed.
And that clearly is the key to it. Yeah, just avoiding those last minute panics. And same thing, Alan, if you don't mind, to you. And obviously you manage for many brands over this week. Yeah, still very early days, but how's it been for you? And any particular sort of learnings or early results coming through?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Actually, it's been the Black Friday itself was brilliant for us and for our brands. So I think we were up, it's initial results, but we were up about 55% on last year. So that's fantastic. Though you got to bear in mind, last year was a COVID year as well. So there was a spike last year as well. So we were really, really pleased. Much like Douglas said, it's not just about the day. So we would have been planning this well in advance. It's, and myself and Francisco were talking about this last week, but you have to watch the cannibalization over sort of a 3 to 4 week period as well. So you do sales come down while people are waiting for Black Friday, and then do they make sure can you keep that momentum going? But again, really good inventory planning. I think it's probably the first year that we had 0 promotions being placed on the day. They were all done well in advance, which is brilliant, and it's a testament to the brands we're working with. I know a lot of them are on the call today, and also our team, as everybody's worked really well together, real partnership to try and deliver it. But as I said, it's 55% year on year in the marketplaces, and we're really delighted. So hopefully we can keep those going. It builds up the pressure for next year already, but it's
very good.
A fantastic week for us and day for us as well.
As you say, I think it's even more impressive coming off the back of COVID last year, and again, sadly, we appear to be going into a little bit more of it again this year. But great to hear some strong early start. Good. Okay. Well, we want to sort of move on now to the main sort of crux of it, and I think there's a lot of obviously current challenges, as I mentioned, with out of stocks, and as perhaps you saw from one of those early slides, there's still many brands are working out what the sort of the right replenishment model is, and it's, everyone is really learning from each other. There's very few in the industry really who can honestly count themselves as experts. So really interesting to get thoughts from the panel about the best kind of model. Francisco, perhaps if you don't mind if we ask with you about what you've learned particularly at Nestlé Health Science over this last year.
Yeah. Well, we have a very particular model. We have a European centralized model, which is really different from the rest of the world. In the rest of the world, we have typical 1P or 3P run by ourselves. But then in Europe, we have a different approach because we had a very different challenge. 1P wasn't working. We were being crapped out by Amazon. Amazon sometimes wasn't even buying from us. So but we saw the opportunity, right? It was a category that even before COVID was rapidly growing, and it wasn't tapped by us. On one hand, we had that opportunity. On the other hand, we had the risk of many resellers damaging the brand. We have quite some premium brands out there. So the content was bad, the price was all over the place. And so we basically needed to do something about it, but we didn't have in the market the resources to do it. So we came out with this plan to do a centralized model, grouping all European markets and outsource the front end to the management on Amazon via Luzern. So I and his team have been working. We've been working together for almost 2 years now, and then on the back end, centralizing it on a Nestlé company that we have called Nestlé, where we centralize all that demand and supply planning, the ordering process, even the billing and the finance part, right? So that enabled us to really, well, we are growing, triple digit since we started, and we keep growing. So it is really proving that is a right approach because of the synergies that we're getting. So it was a way to fulfill those market needs, put them together in a central operations management hub, and then accelerate it. And that's what we are doing today. I mean, the first year was really putting the basics in place, which was a completely innovative model in Nestlé. Nobody had done it before, so we had a ton of learnings and trial and error. That was the year before. Last year, we already had quite a good grasp of it, and then by the end of last year and beginning of this year, we're really growing super fast and efficiently.
Fantastic, and I think thank you for that. I think it's a very interesting. We've had a lot of conversation about this kind of the local versus the centralized model. It does appear that that's becoming increasingly useful, and we'll also talk a little bit later on a bit more in more detail about the kind of the hybrid model and the benefits that can bring. Alan, obviously you as well as working with Francisco, you manage stock across multiple different marketplaces. Bit of a general question, but are there any general rules that the brand should follow to really sort of help manage their inventory planning?
Yeah, it's a great question, Andrew. I think there's probably three things. The first thing is around forecasting, in terms of by marketplace, but also, and by country, of course, but also by fulfillment type, because you may have some marketplaces where you're doing the fulfillment through them, like FBA and Amazon or bol.com and so on. And you have other marketplaces where you have to do the fulfillment yourself. And then you have to make decisions about where do you put the stock. So the forecasting by marketplace, by fulfillment type, and of course by SKU is really, really important. And I think, we obviously use our platform to do that and to try and build that out, that modeling across all of the different marketplaces. But the forecasting is really, really important. Of course, when you first start working with a brand like we do, it's really hard at the beginning, but over time you get better and better and better at it. And that's something that I think is critical. And the second thing as well is, and Francisco touched on it, but the replenishment is really important. It's getting the right level of the right timing and cadence of replenishment, because you've got to replenish not just in a macro sense, as in I got to get some more stuff into Amazon. You're doing it on a SKU by SKU basis, on a country by country basis. So understanding those replenishment timelines and trying to make them as efficient as possible is really important. So we'd like to have, let's say, between 6 and 8 weeks stock in each of the fulfillment centers that we're operating out of it, whether it's FBA or our own warehouses. But to understand that, if you can get that down by a week, that's obviously helpful. It's more efficient, and anything you can do to improve that. But we start with, what is the cadence that we can do initially, and then where can we go from that? And that's a real discussion between the brands and the logistics supply chain people and ourselves. And then the third thing as well is particularly around when you're managing stock across multiple marketplaces. And this is, of course, about inventory planning and avoiding out of stocks. But if you do get things wrong and you're running into problems with out of stocks and availability, it's really important that you're connected to your marketing so that you're not spending money advertising stuff that you can't sell. And I think that's a really important thing that you've got to think about. You showed the slide earlier. I was actually going to quote it in this part of it anyway, Andrew, but in terms of, when you're out of stock, how the demand falls, your organic search falls, your sales fall, and it takes a number of days to get them back up. But of course, the corollary is also true. If you've got your inventory planning right and you do that advertising, you can turn off the advertising and you get the halo effect for a few days where you can continue to sell at the same levels, but at a higher price. And again, that's the sort of stuff that we do a lot with our brands and with the platform we have, but to try and be on the virtuous side of that problem rather than on the problem side of it. So that's the kind of stuff that we would do together. So they would be the three things: the forecasting, the replenishment, and then connecting it back to your marketing spend to get the most efficient use of those funds as well.
Thank you. I love that the summary. Those three very clear ideas, and I think you're right. You know, too often when we talk about availability, it's too often to be kind of doom and gloom about it. But actually, if you are on top of it and you are, like you say, focus on the virtuous side of things, it's great. You can benefit of it, and you know, in a competitive world, that actually, yes, you can benefit from when some of your competitors are struggling and not able to do it and not able to fulfill, and therefore make the most of it, and particularly sort of gain greater sales that way. I think one challenge we've seen, particularly again the focus on Amazon recently, has been sort of well-publicized restrictions on deliveries. You know, they're expanding very fast across Europe. There are challenges perhaps of getting delivery slots, very, very strict delivery timings, and despite there being obviously recent publicity from them that they have increased their warehouse capacity, we know there have been challenges. Douglas, a question for you: is it are there any of these kind of restrictions on Amazon particularly that have really affected you particularly, and is there anything, are you able to share any sort of good workable solutions that you've found to get around them?
Yeah, you picked a good year to ask that question, because we encountered that quite a bit over the last year or so. There's obviously the vendor central side, and there's some solutions there, and the FBA side, there's some solutions there. I'll do the FBA side first, because the issue wasn't so much about Amazon's capacity, it was more about an issue on sort of the feed pricing side of things. There was an issue there that Amazon, it was on their side to resolve and fix, and it took them a good couple of months, 10 weeks to resolve. And in that meantime, there was no stock going into the vendor central side. But we had our backup on the FBA side, which enabled us to maintain our run rates and our rankings and our sales momentum, and kept that going through. We weren't 100% reliant on the vendor central side. And so having FBA as a backup, yeah, really saved our business this year, because like, yeah, who can lose 10 weeks of sales? You just can't afford to. That was a real benefit for us. On the vendor central side, yeah, it was I remember around Prime Day, Amazon were basically, in the lead up to that, Amazon stopped raising automatic POs. The capacity was just rammed. They weren't giving out bookings for 2, 3, 4 weeks. But what really helped us was our relationship with our UK distributor. They've got vendor flex capability. So no need to get booked in with an Amazon warehouse and send a lorry 100 miles down the road to deliver. I've got a really fresh example from last week how vendor flex helped us. We had a ASIN on Black Friday that was just flying off the shelves, or rather flying out of the pick face, and it looked like we were going to run out of stock. So Tuesday morning, spoke to Amazon, got them to raise a PO, pointed to the vendor flex location, spoke to my distributor. Yep, we received the PO. That afternoon, sort of a pallet or so of stock moved across, back in stock, no lost sales. So I'd say, yeah, vendor flex is a good way around Amazon capacity issues. Something else on the distributor side, if your distributor's got the sort of drop ship direct fulfillment capability, where they can ship straight out from their warehouse to the end customer on the Prime service, that can really help, because the customer, as far as the customer's concerned, they're ordering from Amazon, it's supplied by Amazon, they get the same experience, that same sort of Amazon last mile, rapid sort of quick delivery Prime service. That's great as well. You're not reliant on Amazon to place a PO or even sort of move stock across into vendor flex. That's really helped us a lot over the sort of last 6 months or so. When there's been some sort of capacity issues, we've seen the amount of dropship direct fulfillment orders really spike. Sometimes more of those orders than orders going into Amazon's own warehouse at certain times. That was great for preserving momentum. And I think one more thing, just on the vendor central side, using born to run POs. So rather, if Amazon system's not generating the POs, we myself, I'll forecast and work with the distributor to get some born to run POs raised to maintain Amazon's availability, because sometimes their system just it doesn't always, it's not perfect. You see something, the stock levels going down, the sales are going up, and you're like, well, they're going to place a PO now, aren't they? No, sometimes you have to give them a little push. Yeah, and even if you talk to a vendor manager, sometimes it won't get seen or done, because I think vendor managers are some of the busiest people in the world.
They are, and I think that moves us on really nicely. Thank you. I mean, well, firstly, we've kind of heard before, but I think it's a very clear understanding there of the different programs that can benefit and you know what they can do. But you also touched on the point about data and perhaps the good and the bad side of things. With Amazon, you have more data than anyone else. The challenges is sometimes is exactly how usable it is and how reliable it is, even on a real-time basis. And I think, you know, one of the things we wanted to cover today was, again, starting to be able to predict things a little bit more. Now, again, you know, some of our clients have worked with things like the Amazon search frequency rank. So we have seen a bit of a correlation between as soon as once a product is increasing in the search frequency rank. So it's, in other words, it's getting searched more often. And over the last year, we've seen this even for grocery, you know, things like chicken, yogurt, yeah, they've huge increases in search frequency rank. And obviously then at the same time, there is a pretty much direct correlation where you see out of stocks, or sorry, availability rate dropping down. So that it's quite interesting. So that's one, you know, one brief example of using that Amazon data. You know, another one is just simply using sales data. And like you said, Douglas, so using it to understand how you're doing, a combination of sales data, but also out of stock levels, and using that to sort of negotiate with Amazon to get new POs coming from and get better levels of inventory. So we actually had one customer who did this. They were seeing out of stock levels in one category, so actually deodorant categories, around about 30%, where it absolutely peaked. And just by sharing the sales data and out of stock data over time, they were able to manage, negotiate some better terms with Amazon, reduce the out of stocks to just around 2%, which is pretty incredible. And over the course of a year, they saw their market share increase by 8% in total. So again, you know, appreciate it's very easy to say just using data, but there are lots of good examples. Alan, perhaps I go back to you. Obviously, this is an area with you mentioned obviously your services and a key thing for you. Are there any? Have you got any more examples like that of how you know, using the data that you provide can really help improve in stock rates and drive better availability?
No, absolutely, and like you're right, the data is key, isn't it? And I know that's an area you guys are all over as well. I think in terms of you touched on it there, but the sales history is really important, and in terms of, you know, what you're selling by SKU, by country, and so on. And when you tie that data to the stock on hand data, you obviously can work out very easily the number of days sales you have. And you know, we were chatting earlier about the inventory planning when you're selling across multiple marketplaces and multiple countries and multiple fulfillment types. So when you're able to pull all that data together, then you've got a pretty powerful ability, you know, to predict what you need to do. And you know, there's an element of repeating what I'm saying a little bit, because that then ties back into the replenishment. But one of the things we do is, you know, with our brands is, you know, we're working across, as I said, multiple different fulfillment types, but we're also creating virtual bundles for people as well. So sometimes creating new products, and then so now that's thrown into the mix as well. And you're trying to figure out how much stock should we keep for these new virtual bundles that we've got sitting in our warehouse. And when we sell them, we're then going to make them and ship them to the consumer. And then once we get good sales history on those, we're then going to build them in advance and then get them back into the normal inventory chain. So you're trying to manage multiple data points, which are of course always changing. So you're trying to keep all that together. And to your earlier point, Andrew, as well about the out of stocks, it's very interesting what you say, because we have a couple of clients that with that we've got to sort of 99% in stock, which is what you're aiming for. You want to be 100% in stock. That's really hard to do across all your SKUs, but that's where you're trying to get to. And that's what we're trying to take all those data points I talked about, you know, the history, the stock on hand, and the various different demands on those stocks and how you allocate those stocks, and making sure then that you've got that availability. So that's, you know, there's an element of There's no magic in that, but that's, you know, just taking good quality data and using it intelligently to predict, you know, in a reasonably complex world. And that's what we're doing all the while to try and avoid those out of stocks, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another, obviously a key focus, in addition to the ones, the programs that Douglas mentioned, like you know, the vendor flex and you know, obviously born to run potentially for new products as well. The other key element when we're talking about inventory planning, and it's not just about sort of planning, but it's also about more control, is thinking about the hybrid model, particularly on Amazon. So yeah, Douglas, I know you kind of sort of briefly referred into this, that we know there are kind of risks involved with brands managing that. Can you just explain a little bit how that, as you said, how the sort of process works for you?
Yeah, so we were vendor central side 1P first of all, and then we sort of, my experience in a previous role was running a hybrid model of running vendor central, FBA, and also FBM as well, fulfilled by merchant. So I looked into introducing the FBA model as well with ViewSonic, just on a select range of products, and for the purpose more for backup and a bit of sort of pricing management in the market, sort of establishing the SRP and aiming to maintain that. And the way I managed it with Amazon, with the vendor manager, was to be open about it. We didn't want them to look on Amazon one day and see our offer. So I was very open with them about it. I said, look, we're doing this. We're not going to trash our prices. We're going to stick at SRP. We're using it as a backup. And I've listed the sort of scenarios where a backup would be useful to us and also useful to Amazon in long term. If we can maintain that sort of sales rank, if there is an issue on the vendor central side, FBA can step in, keep the sales rank. When vendor central recovers, we've kept that visibility in that ranking, and that benefits vendor central side as well as Amazon as a whole, and of course us. Had a sort of bit cheesy little saying, I'd say. It was vendor for volume, seller for strategy, and this year that's worked really well for us. That not being so dependent on the vendor side, having that backup. We emphasize and we sort of show them that the majority of our business goes through the vendor central side. That's where we see that as where we're going to grow the most, sort of bigger, sort of bulkier orders, but we need that backup. And we've got lots of evidence this year of why we've needed that backup and how we've used it.
Thank you, and I think well, clearly you've done a fantastic job, because we've had a lot of discussion with this at various in previous webinars, and you know, some brands have tried it. Equally, we've heard a lot about the risks of doing it, and the challenges that Amazon can bring if they do find about it. So you know, it's very interesting to hear about your openness. Alan, if I could just put that to you, because clearly this is your area of expertise. It's what you do for your brands. Perhaps you can give us a little bit more detail about what, you know, perhaps the benefits of you know, from a more managed point of view, because I guess there are challenges we know with Amazon if you do have that mixed model, the brands are doing it themselves, and really how it provides greater control over things like inventory planning.
Sure. Yeah, well, the first thing, obviously, and I appreciate the way Douglas is doing it, but you're right, some brands can get in trouble with Amazon if we're running a 1P, 3P strategy themselves. And that's where we come in, because we manage the 3P side and we do it under Luzern's name. So it gives you, you know, a little bit of coverage, I guess, with potential channel conflict, because we're selling as Luzern, not as directly as the brand, but we're doing it on behalf of the brand and in partnership with the brand. And the other part of it is, when we do it, of course, is it's 100% complementary with 1P. We're not doing anything to damage the brand's 1P business. That's, as Douglas said, it's the bigger part of the business for them. So we wouldn't have any customers if we were doing anything to damage that. So we work really closely with the brands to make sure that there's no negative impact on 1P, and in fact there's actually a positive impact, and that's one of the benefits of it. So I guess, and if I just quickly jump into those benefits. We always talk about sort of the 3 pillars of the hybrid model, because you've got your 1P SKUs that Amazon are buying from you. We'll typically, on behalf of the brand, list them and sit in second place, and we won't compete with Amazon. But if Amazon goes out of stock, as Douglas said, you've got that backup plan. Then you've got the longer tail that Amazon don't buy. And of course, we list all of those and create great content and grow the ranking. And when the sales of those grow, they often move into the first bucket and go into Amazon, start buying them. So it's a real benefit to the 1P part of it, as well as to ourselves. And then there's the new launch or bundles. So, you might have a new product coming out that Amazon don't want to buy because there's no sales history, and we can list and sell that for you. Or you may have decide, as I touched on earlier, to create virtual bundles. And again, we can do that. So they're the kind of 3 pillars that we work with our brands. And what it delivers is greater control over pricing and availability, because you're now operating across the full assortments, and you've got a full assortment strategy. You're not totally dependent on whether Amazon buys it or not. If Amazon are squeezing you too much for margin, or there's other issues, you've got a choice now. Do you sell it to them or not? So you get greater control on the pricing and the availability. And of course, with particularly the longer tail and new products, we're helping create great content and optimization, and that also leads to better sales and profitability as well. So they're kind of some of the benefits, I think, Andrew, if that answers your question.
It does, thank you. And obviously, I guess the best way to answer that is Francisco, if you don't mind, to ask you, because as the client, I know when we spoke before this event, you're running this hybrid model in a few of your markets. Do you mind, from your point of view, from the supplier point of view, if you giving us the benefits that you see from running this model for Nestlé Health Science?
Absolutely, and it's pretty much in line with what Alan just said. For us, we're using 1P for, it is actually dividing the brands in the portfolio, depending by model, depending on the objective, right? And the business objective that you have. So we use 1P for more mature, well-known brands with higher volume. But of course, you don't control the price, and you get more higher dependency on Amazon and pressure on margins, right? So we use those brands and those products when they work well. We use it also for acquisition, and then we use 3P for either that long tail or that part of the portfolio which is not the top seller, or for smaller brands that are not that well established yet, or also for premium brands where we want to control the price. And of course, it's more labor intensive. You need to dedicate more time. Going back to the central model, that's a ton of demand and supply planning. Not going back to the supply chain from the supply chain point of view, it's a lot more work. But then in the end, it's, as they say, very complementary, because you control the stock, you control the price. And it's really, you're not playing the whole inside here is you don't play in the same field, don't compete head to head, right? So it's more dividing the territories between 1P and 3P brands and portfolio that you're using.
Fantastic, thank you. Yes, it's interesting, and one thing we hear an awful lot. There's a huge amount of interest. I think that a lot are trying it, but really understanding the best way of doing it. And as you say, the control and the ability to focus on different brands, including those with premium ones as well, is really interesting. We just want to make sure we keep a little bit of time for questions at the end. So just want to move forward into forward planning, which is obviously, as you said, Alan, right at the very beginning, is probably the most important thing to manage your better inventory levels. And really be interested to get, as kind of 3 experts in this area, get your thoughts on a little bit about predictions, but also priorities moving into next year. So really interested whether you see, with all the challenges we're going at the moment, is it sort of more of a positive? Are you looking glass half full or half empty in terms of supply chain management into next year? And perhaps interesting what you think the main challenges are going to be. Who's going to start? I'll pick. Perhaps Douglas, you okay to lead us off on that one?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. For me, glass more on the half full side. The information I'm getting, availability is looking better, or should I say availability is looking like recovering on certain products. There's been some products where availability is just not really existent at the moment, so they'll be coming back into play. There's still a lot of maybes. We feel that costs are going to sort of stabilize. But then obviously with the news going on this week, what's going to happen to sort of transit times and people and shipments moving across borders. Tying in with that, there's the economic side. Will distributors commit to large POs and be willing to hold stock? Sort of looking at sort of the economic situation. That's where something like FBA can come in, because you can, okay, if distribution maybe a bit more cautious, we can back ourselves up through the FBA side of things. Yeah, I think just don't assume that it's going to go either really well or really bad. Just be prepared for whichever way the needle goes. Just have a plan for each eventuality as best as possible.
As I say, sadly, as we've seen over the last few weeks in Central Europe and UK as well now, with COVID again, you never quite know. So yes, plan for the uncertain is certainly true. Francisco, perhaps if I could put the same to you. Obviously, you said fantastic performance at the moment. Hopefully that will continue. Any particular challenges do you see ahead moving into next year?
I see opportunities. No, because particularly for our category and our channel, so it's healthcare and on e-commerce, right? It's really a wonderful moment, because the demand is really, so the people are really realizing that taking care of their health is one of the main priorities, and that's where we play. And then on the online channel is booming, so that's very good for us. The two main opportunities that are CR2, one is cross-border, and the other one is kind of related to that, is pan-European FBA. Cross-border, why? Because actually it's related to the type of the moment that we're living in Nestlé Health Science. We have a ton of new brands that the company has recently acquired that are mainly US brands that we want to expand internationally. And that's why cross-border is the fastest way to do it, online cross-border. So that's one of the main growth vectors that I see for next year. And related to that, which by the way, we've been also tested already for the last 3-4 months, and it's working very, very well on Amazon, but also on D2C. So that's, well, we won't have time for the omni-channel, I think, this time, but that's another very interesting part of the strategy. And then pan-European FBA is, well, we want to synergize on the logistics side of it. So we want to send the product to one central warehouse in Europe in Amazon, and then list the product in all European markets, so we can sell it in all European markets. So again, I'm always trying to go faster, but also find synergies and leveraging the scale of the business for higher return on investment. So that's how I see it for next year.
Yeah, I think we're in a very fortunate position where performance is fantastic. As you say, the main challenge is how you go bigger and faster and continue that growth period. Thank you, Francisco. Alan, finally, to you again. Clearly, some great performance for your brands. What's exciting you about next year, particularly from a supply chain point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Francisco's right. It's not just in his category, but in other categories too. Demand has never been higher, and there's a lot of good news around online. I'm an optimist by nature anyway, so I think we'd be feeling positive. That said, though, there are some challenges, of course, in the supply chain that we're all going to have to keep an eye on. Francisco mentioned pan-European FBA. That's absolutely the correct thing to say. I think also, we're also looking at things like making sure we've got seller fulfill prime in every market as well, so that if there is a problem with Amazon, you can't get stuff in again like we did this year, that you've got that backup plan. So that's something that we've been delivering on as well ourselves. And also you have to remember that with the added demand, which is brilliant, you've also got to make sure you've got the stock in front of the customer wherever they want to shop. So if they want to shop in ball.com, you need to have the stock there. If they want to have it on Amazon, you want to be able to get the stock into FBA. So the stuff we talked about earlier, Andrew, those challenges and opportunities are going to continue to be there, but we're really excited about it. It's a fantastic time to be online. Obviously, the COVID has been very difficult for everybody, but it has moved the online sales forward a couple of years in one jump, right? So that's been very exciting for all of us, I think, from a business point of view rather than from a health point of view. But that's so we're very excited about it.
Good. Good, excellent, good, great to hear. Well, thank you so much. There's so many areas that we've covered today that we could do another whole hour on themselves, but that's perhaps moving into next year. I do just want to make sure we've got a bit of time just for a couple of questions coming through, and if there are any more, do please add them into the Q&A. One quite specific Amazon question here is how relevant have you found the Amazon forecasting tool versus your own forecast versus the reality of what Amazon then orders? Douglas, if I'm saw your reaction there, perhaps could I start off with you there?
Yes, so I've been that tool within Amazon's vendor central system. I extract it and look at it, and then pretty much ignore it because I've never found it accurate. I keep checking it because maybe one day they'll get it more accurate, but I've found it's often they highly overstate what they're actually going to order and take in. Now maybe they do that to preserve availability, to make sure distributors and brands are really stocked up. But in my experience, I look at it and consider it, but I do my forecasting based on what the actual run rates have been and what the factors that have gone into that run rate. So not just what the run rate is, but why is the run rate that? Is it inflated because of a promotion or some marketing, or is it sort of lower than expected because of availability, or is there something happening with pricing? It's just sort of getting a feel for each ASIN. Where is each ASIN at, and why is it like that, and what actions can I take, and then what impact those actions will have. And I work more from that than what Amazon system tells me, although I do cross-reference against it.
Good to check, but yes, lots of data, but not necessarily the right data. Very good. And final question for me, and perhaps Francisco, but if we start with you, if you don't mind. I think it's, I mentioned right at the beginning that a lot of brands are really still at relative early stages and evolving their supply chain capability. You clearly are trialing things which you've described today are bringing about some great sales growth, which is fantastic. Could I ask you if we speak again in a year's time, how do you hope your organization particularly, or how do you hope supply chain management in general will have evolved over that time?
Yeah, it's a very good point. So as we grow in volume, what I'm finding is that will enable us to do two things. One is increase the resources dedicated to that. So we already did that. We had dedicated resources for Amazon in particular, which we didn't have a year and a half ago. And that has helped, working with Luzern, working with our warehouses and factories really to put it all together. And I think that's critical. And the other thing is improving and automating the processes, because now we have all the elements, but the interconnection between those elements is quite manual. So we have regular meetings, like weekly meetings, to know what the status of stock is, what the forecast is, what the ordering process is looking like. But it's quite manual, and it's slower, right? So as we want to grow and move faster, we will need to automate that. And I don't know who mentioned data. For me, is one of the key points. We are really working hard on having that data first, the data that we need, monitor it very closely. And I love what Douglas said, because it's always, for me, it's the data per se doesn't say anything. It's what's behind that data, right? Why are things performing the way they are? And it's tricky. It's tricky because in our case, we have many moving pieces. We have many markets, many brands, many products, and make sense of all that is difficult. But yeah, I think that those are the three things that I will focus on for next year.
Very good, very good. Thank you. And it sounds from what you said already that's going to lead to hopefully a very successful 2022 for you. Final question, Alan. We've kind of talked about, and actually both Francisco and Douglas have referred to this about, and you mentioned as well. There's a question about the sort of the right tools for stock forecasting, and obviously the specific ones. But I guess it just goes back to the principles you said, particularly of monitoring it and using that data on. All three have mentioned it, using it on a regular basis in discussions with retailers, with the marketplaces. Any final thoughts? Anything else to add on that in terms of using the best way, either tools or just best ways of using the data to help with stock forecasting?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think it's the stuff we talked about already, Andrew, in terms of that we obviously do it through our own platform, but there are other tools as well that you can use. But to do that, but it's the timeliness of it is the critical thing. It's just exactly what you said, which is you've got to use it regularly. You've got to be on top of it. You've got to be constantly updating it, like the inventory planning that we do. We had a meeting this morning actually, and it was like, well, it looks like it's changed. It's like, yeah, it does. It changes every day, because as the data changes, you've got to make sure you're adapting. And that brings you back to the stuff we talked about around replenishment and so on as well, because you need to know, what your limitations and constraints are in the system, so that when you can then be planning, as we talked about it, even around Black Friday, so you can plan to take those opportunities when they come up, wherever they are going to come up. So it's being on top of that is the critical thing. So it's the timeliness of the data. It's been all over it on a daily basis, really, and of course you need a lot of automation in that, because you can't do it manually. As Francisco was saying, it's really difficult if you've got multiple brands and hundreds or thousands of SKUs. To do that manually across multiple countries is kind of impossible. So you need to figure out how to automate it, and that's something that we work pretty hard on as well. I know you guys do too, but in terms of making sure that you actually know the real data, and it's accurate and it's timely and it's actionable, and that's the thing that we work really, really hard on.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to finish off. I mean, both three of you, I know you have teams working, for you and with you, but you all look fairly relaxed after a very busy Black Friday. So yes, I think the key is planning and absolutely not just data for the sake of it, but data that you can action and respond to very quickly. Thank you. We're right on time now, but Alan, Douglas, Francisco, thank you so much for joining me today. I say I particularly appreciate it. It is probably one of the busiest times of the year for all of you. So really do appreciate your time. So thank you very much for that. And for all of those of you for joining us today. Just one final thing, we do have, if you want to know a lot more, we've actually created an availability playbook. I've put a link in the chat, which hopefully you can see, but also there is a link. Any of you listening in, it's just profitero.com/playbook/assortment-availability. Nice and simple, easy URL for you to use. There's lots of great, as well as white papers, some of the stats that I've quoted today, but as well as from some of our other partners, in addition to Luzern, about how to benefit from using data, using availability, and what to do to increase, improve your inventory and reduce your out of stock issues. So that was it. Again, thank you very much for your time. I wish those of you who are connected to the supply chain the very best of luck. I'm sure you've got the next 3-4 weeks to get out of the way as we move into Christmas, but we do hope there's continued progression in the industry. Can guarantee that will happen, and we look forward to speaking about this again, perhaps in the new year, and seeing what 2022 brings. So, final thing to say, thank you once again, Francisco, Alan, Douglas, for all your insight today. And thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll speak to you soon. Okay, thanks very much. Bye-bye.